See if third time is a charm. My power's on, almost sounds on, the camera's on. I've definitely got internet connection. Wonder what's going on, why I'm not getting connected. Let's wait and see if anyone connects me this time. Ah, fantastic. Thank you, admin. It's a problem at my end then. Wow, fantastic. Okay, what was I going to do? I can't remember. I tried 3 times and couldn't get on. I'm now confused. Good evening, folks. I'm Calum Lykan, Calum Lykan Storytelling, back with another bit of stories. Thanks, Rebecca, for getting me on. I don't know what was going on, probably at my end. I tried a couple of times and just couldn't quite seem to get connected. So, another Scottish story, but you know what? Before we begin, let's do the usual thing here. You're on Socially Distant Fest, an amazing page, some fantastic performers here. So do remember, if you are enjoying the shows, the songs, the stories, all that stuff, we all do have tip jars. Pop a couple of dollars there just to show us how much you're appreciating what we're doing, keeping you entertained through this bizarre time period. But I also noticed that the admins, now these guys that are keeping this place going, have set up, I think it's a Patreon account. So if you're enjoying this overall event, you know what? Donate something to them, because they're in the same situation as a lot of us performers. We're pretty much unemployed probably for the next year. I mean, let's just be brutal about it. That is a serious potential for us, that there will not be that many live gigs. So thank you to everyone who's set up this amazing Socially Distant Fest. And thanks to everyone who's coming in and joining. So can I just get a few people saying hello, thumbs up on the comments if you're here listening? Just lets me know there are some bodies. I see Jessica's made a wee comment there, recommending obviously to a friend. Wonderful. So, if you are enjoying the stories and the shows, etc., do remember to drop a wee bit in the tip jar. I've got an additional deal. I have copies of my Scottish Bedtime Stories CD, digital copies available. Basically, what I'm saying is anyone that donates over $15, I will send them a code for my Scottish Bedtime Stories CD. What I will warn you in advance, though, is it's not for the faint of heart. Scotland is a dark and brutal and nasty little country. We love it. So our bedtime stories are pretty dark and gruesome. That's what this CD is. Unfortunately, the imagery doesn't come up very well in the camera just with the lighting, but that is me with a bloody hand and a book oozing blood for the CD cover. That will give you an idea what is happening in the collection of stories there. Kimberly, thank you for joining. Oh, wow. Oh, you know what? I should probably put my phone off on silent, because I keep forgetting when people are kind enough to let me know they're there. Unfortunately, you get that weird pingy noise. How did I do this again? There we go. I'm not good with I am good with technology. Don't even lie. I live in technology. It's crazy. Kimberly, Jessica, lovely. And of course, Rebecca, thank you for approving me on again today. So let's kick off. If you listened last night, I told a slightly darker story about Scotland becoming a part of the United Kingdom and, let's just say, cannibals. Let's just put it bluntly. It was a dark and gruesome story where people got eaten. So tonight, I thought I'd come on, soften the tone, and tell you a love story. Because a love story is good. And I'm not even trying to be like funny here. This is actually a genuinely lovely story that I enjoy telling. And it's called The Golden Bowl. Now, this variation, because there are many variants of it, is actually one which is set around the time of the Picts. There is a lot of historical evidence of Picts and bowls, etc., in the stone carvings, etc. Now, if you're not familiar with the Picts, the Picti, the painted ones of Scotland, they were a weird race. It's kind of one of those sad things. We've got knowledge of them, but there isn't a great deal because there was no real written documentation back then. So all our information about the Picts comes from the Romans. And if memory serves me, Tacitus is one of the people who wrote about them. But the thing is, the Picts were basically anywhere from the Firth of Forth up, but they were all over Scotland. And they are supposedly one of the reasons that the Romans didn't really move into Scotland that strongly. And I love this fact. I love the fact that here you have this race of this superpower empire at this time marching all over Europe, crushing all in front of it. It marches through Europe, it marches through England, and it gets to the borders of Scotland. And it stares in to this damp, dreich, miserable, foggy little country. And the Romans kind of stop and stare at this horrible, damp-looking place, and they think to themselves, oh, I'm not sure about this. I mean, they're wearing sandals, so obviously that's a big no-no, in the wet. But they're staring into this dark and damp little country, and then it happens. Coming out of the woods and over the hills, it's this strange, wiry race of people. They've got bright red hair. They're painted head to toe in blue. And they're as naked as the day they're born. And the Picts stand and stare at the Romans and waggle all three weapons at them. And the Romans look at the Picts. The Romans look at each other. The Romans look at the Picts. The Romans look at each other. And really, without saying a word, the Romans kind of, just come away with it. You know what? We've done enough. I think it's time to go home. So the Romans didn't really push into Scotland as much. We have some settlement. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But apparently the Picts were a huge influence in stopping the Romans entering Scotland. And the Picts hold a huge part of our history. They're one of the reasons that Scotland actually exists. The Northumbrian kings were basically pushing all the way up to the tip of Scotland, and that would have eradicated the Scots as we know it. But it was actually the Picts that pushed them back and took back Scotland. In fact, one man, a great chieftain by the name of Brud or Brudai, and he is the man that became the king of the Picts after this. And he is the man of this story. He was a fierce and violent warrior. He was a heroic figure, a giant amongst men. But the story I want to tell you isn't about the brood of blood and bone. It's about the older man. It's about the brood that had given up his warfaring days. It's about King Brood. An older man who decides it's time to settle down, a man that decides it's time to basically find a place to live, find a place to call his castle, his dun, his roundhouse, and basically rule his people in peace. And that's the Brood I want to talk about. So Brood moves up to a Pictish fort, which still exists today, in the form of a medieval castle, just on the loch known as Loch Ness, up in Inverness, Urquhart Castle. And historically, that was an old Pictish fort. So he decides he's going to move up there and basically rule his lands from there. So he takes his very young and beautiful wife, a lassie much younger than himself, with beautiful red flowing hair, and he takes her up there with all his men and warriors and his hunting hound. His hunting hound. You see, Brood was still a man of passion. He loved his wife, but he actually really loved hunting. Hunting was his passion. He would go out into the fields and the hills and into the glens, hunting the stag and the boar. And by his side would be his dog, his faithful hunting dog that he'd reared from a pup. And that dog's name was Bran. Now, I should interject here. Bran is a very famous name for a dog. If you're familiar with any of your Celtic stories, Bran was the name of the great Celtic hero Finn MacCool. And if you don't know much about Finn MacCool, you need to go find out. I don't have time tonight to go through Finn McCool's stories. But he was a legendary figure, and his dog Bran was this powerful hunting dog. Now, how did Brood know about Finn McCool? Well, there was a very famous man called Saint Columbus, Columcille Saint Columbus, who had travelled from Ireland. He had taken the stories of Finn McCool, and he had basically been charged with all his men to try and kind of convert the heathens, the pagans, to the proper religion as they felt it was. And when he met Brood, they became fierce friends. And, you know, St. Columbus would tell him the stories of Finn McCool. So when his dog was bought, when Brood's dog was born, he named it Bran after this marvellous beast from these stories he'd been told. I should also just let you know, Columcille is basically what I'm named after. Calum, the name Calum is basically a variation of Columcille St. Columbus. And the problem with that, it creates a wee bit of an embarrassing note in Gaelic. My name is a Gaelic name. And in Gaelic, it means dove. Yep. I am dove. Can you imagine that? Yeah, this does not resemble a dove at all. Anyway, let's get on with this story. So basically, Brood had retired up to his castle in Inverness, and basically it's set up there as the king looking after all these men, and he was beloved. Everyone loved him, so much so that people would actually travel from all over the lands to give him gifts, to bestow worship on him. And Brood was the sort of king that he tried to acknowledge this, but it became overwhelming. People, the pilgrimages every day arriving at his gates. So he realized that he couldn't just go out and meet every single person and accept the gifts. So he had a huge barn built inside the grounds, and there the items would be stored, and he got his men every day to go out and collect them. And then what he would do is he would basically every day wander through this barn, admiring the sculptures and the pottery and the gold and all these fabulous gifts, trying to at least give respect to the people that had travelled to see him. Now, one day, as he was walking through this great hall, something caught his eye, and it was because it was so simple. You know, normally these things were grandiose, but this was just a simple wooden box. And when he picked it up, Brood noticed how exquisitely it was made. I mean, it was a flawless piece of craftsmanship, so much so that when his thumb hit the hinge that he didn't even know was there, the box popped open. And inside, well, it was the most beautiful golden bowl that Brood had ever seen. He looks at this bowl as he pulls it out of the box, and he admires it, the craftsmanship, the design, and then his eyes fall on writing around the rim in the old Futhark. He reads the words, "Give this bowl to the one you love the most." Well, Brood doesn't even need to think about that. He basically turns and slowly walks out the great hall, across the courtyard toward where his residence is. He walks in and down the hall, and he knocks on a door. His young queen is inside, and she's pampering herself, brushing her long, beautiful hair, making herself all pretty, when she's disturbed by a knock on the door. Enter, and in shambles the old king. And she looks at him with that look. And he's got something in his hand, and he reaches out, darling, I've brought you a gift. Dismissively, she says, just sit it on the side table. I'll have a look at it later. The king does. And with that, he's dismissed. He leaves the room, and she continues to pamper herself. Now, when she's finished getting ready, she's about to leave the room when all of a sudden the gift catches her eye. And she walks over and she picks up the bowl, and she admires it, the gold. It's exquisite, and she thinks to herself, oh, the old fool. But then she too sees that writing. Give this bowl to the one you love the most. She throws on her cloak. She slips the bowl into the sleeve and she leaves her room. Walking through the corridors, making sure she's not seen, she slips out the back door, crossing the courtyard, heading towards the soldiers' quarters. Slipping in, she heads down the corridor and knocks on a door and slips inside. The handsome young captain of the guard is preparing himself for his duties when she walks in. Darling, I have something for you. And she hands him the bowl. She gives him a kiss and says, I cannot stay. I'll be back later. And with that, she slips out the room once more. The captain of the guard is a practical man. And he looks at this wonderful gift from his lover and he admires it, but he is a soldier. He sees the purpose of it rather than its beauty. But as he happens to look at it, he too catches that writing. Give this bowl to the one you love the most. Well, without a thought, he goes into the side room where his young teenage boy is sleeping. He places the bowl by his bed, finishes dressing, and heads out to his duties. Now, some of us have got teenagers. I don't, but I know a lot of teenagers from bygone days, and a lot of my friends do have them. And I believe they can be a troublesome bunch at times, particularly when it comes to getting out of bed. This young lad was just the same. He was doing everything he could to fight the sun, pulling his blankets over his head, hiding deep in the darkness as the sun slowly rose. But even he couldn't fight forever. He realized it was time to get up, and with a grunt and a groan, he throws off his sheets and puts his legs on the floor, sits on the edge of his bed, and then he sees it. He sees the bowl. A gift from his father, and he picks it up and, oh, wow, this is cool. Ah! And then he sees it. The inscription. Give this bowl to the one you love the most. And then it comes to him. He throws on a tunic and breeches. He runs out of his quarters, down the corridor, across the courtyard. He's running towards the kitchens, just in time for the young serving girl to walk out the door, and he nearly collides with her. And then he's standing there, dumbfounded, not knowing what to say as he stares at this pretty young lassie. And all he can do is hold out the bowl with an expectant look on his face. And she reaches and she takes it, and poof, he's gone. In a fiery red face, he's disappeared before he needs to even attempt to speak to this lassie. And the young serving girl looks at this bowl, but she's got chores. So she slips it into her aprons and she goes back in where she mops and brushes and peels and chops until she's told she can take a break. And she heads out to the courtyard and sits in the sun. And then she remembers the bowl and she pulls it out and she looks at it and she is in awe. She's a serving girl. Never has she been given such a gift. And she looks at the beauty and then she sees, well, she doesn't really know what she sees. She's never been taught to read. She just recognizes markings but has no idea what it says. And as she's sitting there puzzling over this, one of the old priests comes round the corner, very heavily robed, dark robes, a big long beard, deep brows, and a scornful look in his face, and he walks along. And the young serving girl plucks up her courage and jumps out in front of him, holding out the bowl. The old priest stares at her and then sees the bowl in her hands and takes it and looks at it and admires it. And then he sees the inscription and he looks at the young lassie, Do you know what this means? And all she can do is shake her head. And the old priest smiles and simply tells her, this says, give this bowl to the one you love the most. He hands back the bowl, and on his way he goes. Now our young serving girl stands there for a couple of moments thinking and puzzling over this bowl, and then it dawns on her. She knows exactly who to give this bowl to. She heads across the courtyard to the great halls. The guards are sleeping in the afternoon sun, so it's easy enough for her to slip by, and down the corridor she heads and knocks on a door. In his chambers, the old King Brood is pacing back and forth. He doesn't know what to do. He's a little unsettled today. He's restless, and in the corner, his faithful hound Bran is whining away, miserable, desperate to do something, and wondering why his master is so ill at ease. When all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. The old king goes and opens it, and standing there is the young serving girl. The serving girl that he remembers years before had come to the village as a slave, and he had freed her, allowing her to live her life. But she's holding something out, and the old king reaches and takes it, and she too, embarrassed and scared, is gone before he can even thank her. And then Brood is staring down at a bowl, a very familiar bowl. And as he turns it in his hands and he checks it and he reads that inscription, give this bowl to the one you love the most, a little bit of his heart breaks. And as he stares at that bowl, slowly but surely a smile forms on his face as he realizes who he should have given it to from the first instance. He walks over to where the jug of water is, and he fills the bowl with water. He places the bowl down on the flagstones, and at the chink of it, his faithful hunting hound Bran gets up, goes over, and drinks his fill. As the king is watching his faithful hound, he realizes then what he should have done all along and what he should be doing for the rest of that day. He grabs his cloak, he grabs his quiver and his bow. He looks down at his faithful hound. Bran, let's go hunting, boy. Let's go hunting. Thank you. The Golden Bowl is a beautiful old story from Scotland. There are variations of it, as I mentioned at the beginning, but that is the one that I love. I just love the little twists and turns, and I love all the connections. Brood is, in fact, a real hero, a real historical character from Scotland. St. Columba is also a real character. So this story has a lot of kind of myth, folklore, and also history connections, which makes it a nice combination of a story. And that's why I love telling that one. It's a beautiful story to tell. But if you do enjoy these stories, do remember I do have a wee tip jar there. So please do donate, just to kind of like say thank you if that's your way. If not, follow me on Facebook as well, please. I will be posting live on Facebook as often as I can, usually every day. In fact, Saturday coming up, probably about midday or 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, I'm going to go on and probably do another hour, 2 hours of storytelling for an audience. I think this one's going to be slightly more Viking themed, just because I haven't done Viking stories in a while. But as I said at the beginning, if you enjoyed the show and the stories, do please tip. If you wish to tip over $15, make sure your email address is connected to the tip. The reason is, I will send you one of these by email, which is a copy of my Calum Lykan Scottish Bedtime Stories CD, the digital copy, and that'll give you about 72 minutes of my glorious voice and storytelling. However, dark, gruesome, grisly Scottish tales, because the only way a Scotsman gets to sleep is the screams of misery and bloodshed in his ears. So, folks, thank you for listening. You, as always, have been an amazing audience. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you all tomorrow. At some point. I never know when. I just like to jump on when I can. But thank you again for listening. And do please donate to either myself or other performers or the admins now as well. Support your local artists or your international artists, because at the moment, this is one of the only means a lot of us have of making any money. But thank you again. It's been a pleasure. Love yous all. Have a good night.